look serious. Right. Continuing what we were talking about the marking off that people do in the neural areas of one another, in conjunction with the all-encompassing cross-pollination that life experiences through man's various and sundry conflicting opinions, ideas, and beliefs, and etc., that results in the birth of new children ideas, little nipper thoughts that were new. Now, where I wanted to start our attention tonight was, if you'll note all of that we had talked about for the last several times, how this results in a feeding of the future. Because that is what is afoot. But in the singular world of man, in the three-dimensional sense, that is the secondary world. In that sense, that secondary world grows only through one fashion. Well, in general, it grows like anything else only via new energy or new matter. But then when you look around, that you are dealing with what, by all appearances, is a closed system, although that is open to further understanding. But at the 3D level, it seems to be a closed system wherein nothing is created or destroyed except Newton's opinions. At that level, you still are talking about, in the secondary world of man, you're talking about a new creation. It continues to expand. It should be obvious that man is not that much different at the primary level, at the strictly somatic, physical animal level than he was 1,000 years ago, 200 years ago. But he is different, not only here, but what here has done to out there. That secondary world continues to change. It changes while we stand here. These people are taping some of this, and by the next time we get together, somebody can say, wait a minute, this equipment is outdated. It continues to grow, but it grows through an infusion, apparently, of new energy. But what is the new energy or the new matter? Is one thing, and one thing only. What is that? My finger. Ideas. Not my damn finger, ideas. But now comes some of the, I'm pleased to submit my opinion, comes some of the more interesting aspects of the new ideas. The new ideas for the secondary future come from the E-pool. They come from that which seems to be irrelevant at any particular time, that you would give it your best 3D scrutinization, assuming they allow that in your particular municipality. If they don't, tell them you're just looking. Tell them you're just studying the matter. And that'll usually satisfy the chief of the intellectual police around most smaller locales. And of course, make yourself a mental note not to ever use the word scrutiny again, at least there. Assuming they let you get out of town after. Well, at any rate, at any particular time, that if you could withdraw yourself to a point, a place of unseen, objective reconnoitering, and you looked in upon yourself, other people, and any particular situation, wouldn't matter where, you cut up the processes of human life and you jumped in and you specified a situation, an occurrence, conversation, investigation, anything, and you looked at what was going on, and something was going on. But you're not simply looking at somebody engaged in all-encompassing ennui or sleep, but something's going on. So if you look at what's going on, then apparently the energy, whatever is going on, is being generated by some binary conflict. Let us say it's two people discussing something, discussing in what way video equipment, the taping, video taping could be improved. So let's say there's two people, perhaps very well versed, recognized authorities, but if they're sitting there in the lab and they're discussing it, and you're up there in the nether world, you're looking down, and it would appear from 3D intelligence that in this secondary attempt for them to come up with an improvements in the video taping systems, that anything that's going to come out of that has got to come from the byplay, the interaction between. Let's say that one guy's saying what we should do is go back to the beta system, but we should make thus and thus improvements. And the second guy says, no, we should stay where we are with the VHS mode and do some other something. And so they're discussing it. And you would think, if you were just ordinary, civilized, and intelligent in the primary world, that if anything's going to come out of this, it will be through the kind of binary, dichotomous dance of ideas between such people as these two. May I say, on behalf of me and my finger, nay. That is not where the food, that is not where the fuel for the secondary world comes from. That's not where the new ideas come from. They come from the E-pool. If we're looking again, using our operational terminology of C, D, and E influences, forces, drives, directions, that C and D would seem to be, at any particular juncture, two guys talking. Whoever's talking and pushing his view, let's say it's man A and man B, talking about the possibilities of improving video taping. And man A, or man 1, is being active when we look in, and he is pushing his view. So we'd say right then, and it seems to be a view, a constructive view. He's not saying something such as, well, what we should do is do away with taping. The world doesn't need video. So forget that. That they're involved with trying to expand something that is already extant and operational and apparently now necessary in the secondary world. So man A is pushing his particular program about how we might improve videoing. We would call that, for that one instance, relative to everything that's going on, we'd call that a C-driven influence. Because let us say, it's still sticking with him, and this cutting up the processes of life into a scene that is now thing specified. We look at that, and the other guy, while he's listening to man A talk, man B is going either externally, or we can look into his little brain and we see him going. Giving the body language of no, that we're just sure. And so from that view, relative to man A, man B is being driven, is reflective of the D influence. He's resisting. His opinion, his idea, in fact, would be destructive to man A's constructive opinions in the widest possible sense. But then when it shifts, then the other guy can say, well, I don't agree with that, and let me tell you why, and I've been working on this. And so then you could see from that same kind of view, which is operational, it is worthwhile to use, or I wouldn't harp on it, that you could look now at man B, and rather than him being an employee of a D, resisting status quo force, employer, he says, well, I don't agree with you. I respect your opinion, but at any rate, let's get past my disagreement right now, because there's something you didn't even cover. And so he starts a conversation in an area that he believes he has some new ideas that they should pursue. So then he is now trying to mark off, he's got his leg up, and he is trying to mark off an area now, just as man A had done to him. Now man B is trying to do to man A, he's trying to mark off in him, and now he is being a proponent of some C force, relatively speaking. So you would think if anything is going to come out, any kind of new ideas are going to come out of the situation regarding the improvement, especially, at least with these two people, this situation in that lab. If anything's going to come out of it, it's not even open to any kind of further consideration. It's going to come out of this kind of interplay. Tut-tut. I'm serious. If some of you don't understand, I'll repeat. Tut-tut. All right, now let's go on to the... It has got to come out of the E-pool. It comes out of that, let's stick with this situation for a second. These two guys sitting there in the lab having this discussion. Are we having serious problems of some kind? We are now. Hello? It will not come from that. It will come from, vis-a-vis that situation, it will come from that which appears to be irrelevant to that situation. It will be something extrinsic to that. I am not wont to stop right there and in some way try and give you an example, which I could do, but it gets longer than the example is worth to try and in some way prove specifically how that works. But I have a devilish notion that I'll bring it up in a few minutes somewhere else. It will come not from that particular dance of C and D. Not that the C and D dance itself is impertinent, because there could not be the irrelevant source of new ideas were it not for the C and T wrestling at it. So you can't say, if that's where you thought I was leading, you can't say that the C and D itself is irrelevant, because there would be no irrelevant. There would be no E force were it not for the C and D. If you're those attempting to engage in a kind of subversive, revolutionary, intellectual activity, then you have got to take into account, if that sounds like too much of a mouthful, anybody trying to understand anything out of the damn ordinary. Anybody aspiring to intelligence higher than an Alabama or Belgium gendarme would have to do this. You have got to take into account that growth comes not only from the obvious struggle between whatever it was, and you would not have to know or use my term C and D, but you would have to see that there is always, in the secondary world, and it's true in the primary world, of course, eat or be at, but in the secondary world, you are dealing with, at all times, a struggle. Perhaps not overt, and certainly in the secondary world at its zenith is not bloodletting, but you are seeing a struggle. You are seeing a conflict between ideas, and let's call them C and D. But then to try and ever understand more than is going on in life, to get past the obviously peculiar to the really peculiar, you have got to see that growth comes from somewhere else. And you would have to take into account this somewhere else that's outside the obvious, that's outside at every juncture. Ordinary, civilized, reasonable intelligence would show you two sources, 2 points, 2 people, 2 camps, 2 parties, 2 theories, 2 conflicts, 2 nations, 2 something or others. But you would have to see that beyond the obvious, that everyone sees, beyond the obvious of it being a C and D dance conflict, or between dominant and passive, dominant and submissive, active and real passive, between an offensive and a defensive, between the dog and the bush. Beyond that, you would have to take into account that growth is going to come from somewhere else. If you were involved, I hate to sink so low as to say this verbally, but it won't. If you were involved in some kind of attempt at self-improvement, I'm suggesting to you that you would, if I may say so, have a leg up. If you took into account the E. Because ordinarily what are people faced with that try and improve themselves? Like, I'm going to quit smoking. You immediately have a C and D dance, as always. I mean, it's there. You would not have to say, I'm going to quit doing anything. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to quit eating candy. You would not say that unless it already had opposition. You're already doing it, and you already don't like it. And if it was simply a matter of announcing, well, I'm going to quit drinking. If that's all it was, that is, that you made the decision, you or anybody, and the decision was a deed done, you wouldn't even say it. But the reason you say it is you know, hey, bad chances this is going to happen. Or me say I'm going to quit drinking. I think about the many years I've spent on my hands and knees and in jails and wrecking cars. If I thought that was something, you know, I know what I'm in store for. And what you're in store for is a big C and D dance. What I'm suggesting that at least metaphorically, that you might have a leg up, is to understand if there is going to be new information, if there's a chance for real change, and you had a kind of new perspective of it, is don't look right there. Because if there was immediate joy possible there, I repeat, if you were the sort that could say, well, I think I'll quit drinking. That's it. So if you're that sort, or whatever it is, I think that I will improve myself. If that's it, and you immediately went forth and just improvement became your middle name, no problem. But since that is not the normal race course for most people, I was just suggesting as mundane, as pedestrian as it may be to talk about self-improvement, which I don't know who tricked me into doing this here for a second, I am suggesting that instead of looking down where the problem is, where everybody sees the problem is, I need to quit drinking. But I also look down there, my body is accustomed. I've probably got some alcoholic genes in me somewhere, but at least, even if I don't believe in that, at least I'm accustomed that I have myself 4 or 5 drinks every day, and I have before, because of circumstance, been involved in a meeting at work or something, and it got past the cocktail hour, and I hate to say it, but I looked down and I was beginning to feel bad. I mean, that's just a physical, known medical fact. So you got the problem. You know where to look. So it's going to be a struggle between me and getting over that. I was suggesting, what if? We all know the problem. Don't fool yourself if you're trying to engage in self-improvement, which may be an oxymoronical statement in itself, but don't fool yourself any worse by thinking, well, hey, they're not fooling with some guy just fell off of a damn turnip green express truck that came in, because I see the problem. I bet many people say, oh, I'll quit drinking. I'm no dummy. I see that I'm going to have my hands full. There's a problem here. Well, hey, let's step back and make way. They think, since Einstein died, where the genius is coming from. Make way. To see that kind of problem and to think, well, I'm getting somewhere. I have identified the problem. You may be getting somewhere, but I got news for you. You didn't have a very long trip in mind. You could just gone down at the bus station and hung around the lockers or something, and that's about where you got. Because what I am suggesting, not to ordinary people, because I assume I don't see any, is there's a problem. Don't think, well, at least I've got the problem narrowed down. Give yourself a break. I mean, that is nothing to say, well, what I've got to do if a man, I know they say it's kind of crowd down in the city. Well, if a man's going to deal with a problem, first off, he has got to, not beat on his palm again like last time, but he has got to correctly identify the enemy, gauge their strengths, take into account his own weaknesses, make some kind of plot. Again, I say, I for one will make way for superior intelligence and insight when I hear it. I wasn't sarcastic enough. That's nothing. What I'm suggesting is, there it is, and any fool knows that. Your kid brother, and everybody has one, you just don't know where to look. He knows that. What I'm suggesting is, look somewhere else. Because if any change is possible, the new information is what's going to make the change. And it's not there. It's in the irrelevancy. The irrelevancy pertinent to, relative to, present to that situation from any view, from your view at that time. It is in the irrelevancy. Specifically, besides the information, besides the ideas, a little more specifically, would you note that the territories themselves that you're attempting to mark out with new information, that people attempt to do to each other and people attempt to do to themselves, the territory itself to be marked off and fed by the information has got to be new. It is only crude animals, including men that be at that level, that go back and continue to remark the same territory. They do it, but they use, well, I beat a helpless allegory or metaphor to the ground. So I'll just repeat it one time in case you didn't hear it. Only at the crude animal, primary level, do creatures go back and remark the same territory, which includes many men. But even if you had the first part, if you had some new information, you had some new neural urine, and you could raise your leg and you're attempting to mark off new territory, let's say in yourself right now, and if that's too complicated, in someone else. If you had the new information, you had something fresh, the territory itself has got to be new, because even if you had new information, you go back and mark the same locale, no problem under ordinary conditions. It will not count against you in the city. But it is nothing new. It is not fresh, and it will not facilitate any increase in what a person may understand about the truly peculiar. It could be said like this, that if we were talking about new neural areas that attempt to establish a new playing field, literally, to ignite and to fire up new areas in your own brain. The attempt to do that by using anything that is tried, anything that is used, anything that has any age on it, such attempts has no future. That is what passes in an individual lifetime. That is a local reality to one person. That all the information, all the beliefs they have, all the hopes they have of some great breakthrough in their understanding, some actual shock, some change put into their genetic makeup, when it's on the basis, and it can be either one of the two, or of course three possible combinations, that the information, the ideas, are old, or two, even if that's not true, the territory they're attempting to mark out is already established territory. Or three, I was going ahead and add it, I hate to make you feel really depressed, a combination of the two, which in the city is not even noticed, except you go, that sounds familiar, yeah, that sounds right. Of course, between people that may cut down on the spark in the conversation, but to oneself, it feels mighty, mighty good. You think, hey, I'm still sane. I'm still having good old thoughts that I recognize, and I feel all right. I don't mean physically, forget that. My brain feels all right, because I'm marking off with good old known ideas in good old known locations, things that I know for sure. That which is tried, that which is old, that which is used, has no future. Put it to you another way, very directly. The past has no future. Or some of you are really getting the cerebral shingles. How about this way? The old, the tried, the used has no place in the future. Does that sound better? That almost, somebody got a pen? That almost makes sense, doesn't it? Compared to the first one, that the past has no future. How about an aside? How about the great historical monster tales, under all sorts of different descriptions, mythology and legends, but they're monster tales. One good specific one within a centennial or so of our lifetimes, but the monster tales, besides their ability to frighten at the older animal level, like good slash movies or whatever they call them, the chainsaw murderer from Biloxi movies and all the books that I know continue to be big sellers, but the monster tales themselves was beyond the obvious, beyond the fright that it gives children and other grown-up people. There is a 5D background to this, I suggest to you, and it's reflected in the stories in a way that the animal, the kind of fright and the tingle that people get from monster stories, do not recognize. May I suggest to you it is a kind of genetic message coming through, such as the one I was thinking, that Dr. Frankenstein, in his attempt to create new life, to mark off new territories in the secondary world, because he's not actually creating at the primary level, none of us are, of actually creating anything new, but the secondary level, he is going to produce, create, construct a new creature. Sounds all right thus far. The life should be in favor. Except there's one flaw. The bastard used used parts. Did he not? Now even Sister Shelley, which doesn't matter, but the woman who wrote that is not what they had in mind, but as always, the genetic messages of life still come out if you got a kind of peculiar ear. Because here it is, and at one level, a Frankenstein, a Dr. Frankenstein, is actually working in life's behalf. And of course now, 100 and whatever it is, 20 or 30 years afterwards, we have now genetic engineering, playing around with all this, and it's still the same sort of thing, but you could look, even back then, that a Dr. Frankenstein, at first blush, would really be toiling on life's behalf. that there he is trying to create, trying to construct a new creature, or create at the secondary level, if you can look at it that way. But he is constructing a new creature. He is attempting to, within the framework, the nervous system of life in man, to mark off a new territory. That he takes pieces out of dead people, creatures are already gone, takes them and puts them together, and so if he can run the spark through this thing and jump start it and it gets up, it's going to be something new. He built it. It would have never happened accidentally, any more than a combustion engine would have accidentally, that, as we've been through, all the iron ore come out and in some way smelt itself. If I were in one of those, by the way, cities where they don't want you to say scrutinize, I'm not sure I'd say smelt either. But at any rate, and all these ores, refine themselves and accidentally throughout eons, which is right outside Biloxi, but that finally they turn into carburetors, and pistons and piston rings, and finally just accidentally all come together. Not going to happen, because that's man's jurisdiction, secondary creation. In the same way, Dr. Frankenstein's buddy here would have never come together accidentally. Frankenstein had to take all these people, cut them up to parts he could use, and paste them, stick them all together. And up to that point, it sounds like, that this man may amount to something. I bet life is going to find this interesting if it has time to notice that a guy is not just fooling around back then trying to invent the light bulb. This guy's trying to construct, mark off, that is, a whole new area by constructing a creature that would never happen. But then as all the monster stories, and Frankenstein was not the first, in case you never thought about it that way, they're all the way back to the Bible and the Sumerians and people in Mississippi and the Hindu literature. There are these stories everywhere. The Frankenstein tale is just was an 1800 version of it. But it always does this. The plan runs a what? Not a foot race, a muck. And it's always on something, well, the moral seems to be that man should not fool around with the areas that should be within the exclusive franchise of the gods. The man has no business doing this, or whatever it is. Or Frankenstein got drunk and reversed the AC and the DC, or the ground and the hot wires to the monster. It's always some kind of obvious moral. Like kids, don't go out and try to dig up a bunch of dead people and stick them together. And that seems to be it. But consider what I'm pointing out. The monster tale always does this. The monster is always created because he got no choice at the 3D level, that is in the secondary world. But this attempted new creature is always made out of used parts, and it will not work. That is, if you consider a neural junkyard, if you take used parts, no matter how you shift them around, the only thing you can put together is going to be a used brain. That's it. And so he can take parts from different people, so that he got through with his monster, and the pieces, let's say he used pieces out of 10 people, and we bring the mothers of those 10 people. Just trust me, the mothers look, and they cannot identify their particular progeny's piece there. In other words, nobody, it looks like a whole new thing. So he can shift it around, but you're still dealing with a used car. You're still dealing with a piece of used equipment, no matter how you rearrange it. So the attempt, and you've got to really jump into somewhere beyond the metaphorical now with these Frankenstein stories, but if you attempt to construct a new creature and you're using old ideas, old parts, they've been used. Don't worry about old or think, well, wait a minute, the kind of ideas I'm having are new, because I just had this idea last week. Listen, it's used. Of course, I know you got to deal with what you can do, and probably some people might hear that and think, well, now I can take that up until an idea maybe I had a year ago, but Jesus, some of the ones I've had in the last few weeks, I can't consider them used. You can only do what you can do. I agree. But that does not withstand what I'm pointing out, that it is still a used part. And any idea, any belief, any expectation a person has that they're going to put together to construct a new creature, to mark off new territory. New! That is, it's going to be something, the very things that I want to find in life, the answers I seek, the insights I want. We're talking new. To believe that you're going to put together a new creature. I got a different haircut. I changed religions. You can do anything you want to, but if you're marking off the same area with ideas, with information, with parts that are used, what you're going to come up with is a used creature. You will come up with the monster. Dr. Frankenstein in the beginning, he didn't say, I'm going to create a monster. It was, I'm going to create new life. He might have said that if you're listening real fast to the time we got, he was constructing new life. Not creating new life, but constructing new life. And he didn't call it a monster. It was only a monster after the thing cranked up. And of course, whatever the story was, I only know it really from the movies, to tell you the truth. But anyway, the monster guy out of hand. It wasn't at all what Dr. Frankenstein had in mind. And why? Because it was not new. And there is no other way to cut it. Not if you've got a subversive view. Not if you've got any chance of seeing the true peculiarity of life. The monster was only a monster once it started operating. And I repeat one more time, the author of the book or people who've done movie versions or etc., nobody had any knowledge of what the genetic message behind that was, because it was talking to the future. But it only became a monster after the thing got up and began to run amok. And the running amok was this, that it did not reflect the future. It reflected the past, because it was made out of used parts. Let us point our fingers and then say, forget the monster out there. That does not sound like your orientation, your ritualistic transposition from a nipper through puberty, being an adult, having your own brain. Yes, but I had my own brain. I didn't have some nut Dr. Frankenstein putting it together. Well, excuse me, yeah, right. Right, you sit around and you tinkered and you put your own together. Yes. Well, no, well, not the way you mean it, but yes, I'm responsible. May I, for the third time, stand aside for true genius when I hear of it. So, you're a self-made man there. Yes, I am. You notice I had the decency not to pursue that little scenario and say to the guy, where'd you get the parts? I studied, I'll have you know, at Harvard, did 2 years at Cambridge, studied with so-and-so, and you don't hear that. I am a self-made man. I came from humble circumstances. In fact, I even came from humble circumstances. But I came from humble circumstances, and I fought and I clawed my way. I had to earn a damn scholarship to get through elementary school. But I made it. But in college, I have pursued, and they begin to tell you what they have done through the sweat, the intellectual sweat at least, of their own efforts, and who they've studied with, the books they've read, the schools where they've been. I did this. And they would see no parallel at all, or they'd take it as some sort of sarcastic joke, to see a parallel between that and what I was pointing out, symbolically even, about the Frankenstein monster tale. Well, somebody else didn't do this. I didn't have some mad scientist or some guy that didn't know what he was doing putting together my intelligence, my personality. I may not be perfect, they like to say, as men are pleased to say. I may not be perfect, but at least I put me together. I had a dream of what I wanted to be, and I pursued that dream. I studied. I picked out those men and women whom I admired, who had the knowledge. And all he's saying is, I went out there and I dug up bodies, and I cut off all these pieces off of the corpses, and I put together my own, remember, Frankenstein didn't call it a monster, put together my own creature. But rather than this big old thing's all sewed up and made up and played by Boris Karloff and then what's his name, instead of that, I put this together. except that nobody sees any sort of parallel. All right, let's give the man credit. You put it together, but do you not see what I'm saying? That you put it together out of used parts. Of course, even if somebody tried their best to hear that, ordinary intelligence, you reach a point that if you went, all right, I hear what you're saying, and even if I took it metaphorically, I would have to say, yeah, you're right. But then the question would be at the 3D city level is, what's the alternative? And of course they're right. It's why this kind of information, well, it has no value. Because I could get some ordinary intelligence to follow me that far, and they'd go, all right, I hear what you're saying. That we're all sort of maggots. Or let's be more charitable, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And I could say, I hear what you're saying, that everything I and everyone else knows is in some way a kind of ripping off, unauthorized use, stealing use of other people's ideas. Is that what you're saying, more or less? And if I was that dumb, I'd go, well, all right, that's not unfair. And they say, all right, I hear you. You're saying that we're making up our own brains even if we were responsible. You're saying we're making it up in a similar way that Dr. Frankenstein did his creature out of the dead parts of other people or other ideas. And if I went, okay, then they would still have to say, well, what is the bloody alternative? What do you suggest? Of course, I'd been that dumb to go that along. I'd have to go, look, I got to go, and I'd have to play that game because you cannot tell ordinary intelligence what the alternative is. I have asked one of the few, oh, that's not true. I've asked one unanswerable city question. That, all right, if that's true, if everything that we can do to put together our own intelligence, our own personality, if it's made up of used parts, used ideas, that we are in effect grave robbers and we will not produce anything new, I hear you. What's the alternative? That's an unanswerable question to that kind of intelligence. Because what are you going to say? Of course, anybody thinks I left you in the lurch. It is a matter that you have got to be able to fire up, literally, your intelligence, your brain into a new area, because where you now stand, where the city is, as we've been wont to call it lately, the secondary world's local site in you, there is where that question is unanswerable. Like, well, what's the alternative to piecing together a creature out of used parts? And there is none, because there's nothing available in the city but used parts. You have got to you've got to leave the stadium. You've got to leave that playing field, if it's possible. You've got to leave here, not dragging it with you, not trying to take this used creature, not trying to take a 69 Edsel and think, well, I'm just going to, I'll move it around, I'll put that ugly looking grill, I'll put it in the rear, I'll make a side door out of it. You can do it all you want to, but you still got a damn Edsel. No matter how many parts they dig up that Frankenstein did, it's going to end up, he's going to have a monster. Even if he goes through it once and it gets up and the thing makes rude noises and will not dress for dinner, and he just thinks, aha, I know my mistake. I use cheap parts. And so if he tries to redo it and he tells his minions, when you go out to the graveyard and you start digging up, I don't want you to go over there in Potter's Field. I want you to go around there where they've got these huge mausoleums, these big, where you can tell it's rich people died, or intelligent people, and dig them up. You understand? And next time, I'll have a better creature. You'll still have a monster. Because no matter how you shift the parts, no matter what you do, it's used. It is not of the future. If it's not of the future, it is not constructive. It is not expansive to life, which it doesn't matter in a sense on an individual level, people doing that. But for the local person, the individual person, it matters a lot. Because what it does is stop any possibility in your lifetime of seeing anything new. If you just keep trying to piece together the parts without recognizing that all parts are used, and to say that some used parts are better than ever, there is some validity to that just at the hobby level. In other words, if you had intellectual hungers, it's better, just for instance, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's better to read Melville than it is to watch Dallas. I can't believe I said it, but I did. But if you, at the secondary level, if you had hungers that were more or less intellectual to be in better physical shape, then you'll be better off to get out and take up exercising, or let's say jogging, than you are to sit there and your exercise is throwing away your remote control and getting up and changing the channel. It's all relative that there are things that, relatively speaking, that are better or worse. I just want to, for any of you that's got an intellect that's still a smart ass and tries to say, wait, I can punch holes in some of this. It's still, though, if you're getting past any desire, any satisfaction to living at that hobby level, no matter how you change things, even if you dug up better parts to put together your Frankenstein, to put together your creature, that is to try and put together a new set of ideas, a new way to look at life, if you use used parts, no matter how you change them, no matter how you shine them, no matter what you do, you end up with a used creature. And anything used is of the past, and the past has no future. I repeat one more time, I wasn't going into that tonight, but some of that should be just obvious to some of you people, like seeing a green painted elephant when you're on a train that's flying by at 60 miles an hour. You know that it was there, right? It might sound a little peculiar, but you know it's there. So some of you should know that outside of what I'm talking about the individual, this has some implications to life. But if we're talking about one person simply continuing, as almost everybody does, continue to try to put together new creatures in themselves out of old parts, as far as life's view of one person doing that, it's of no consequence. You can keep rebuilding the same old monster over and over. Life is doing something else. Its changes are at such a tempo and at such a scale that even when it does something, even as it expands, as I had a Kairos point out to you a few nights ago, if life makes such changes, it's not going to do you any good, not if you're ordinary. It's too early, it's too late, it's too far away. It seems to be strangely at first pertinent, and then it seems, though, to continue to distance itself. Or the elephant is not as close to the train as I thought. I'll get off this station and go back because I can't believe that. And you finally pull the cord and you get the train stopped and you jump off while the conductor and everybody's making obscene Italian gestures at you. And it leaves and you see that green blob and you say, I knew it. There's got to be a great lesson. But you start walking and it's like you never get there. But back to the individual level. The pertinence is, for a few people, not much of anybody, is witnessed by how many people are interested in this. That is me and you and, oh yeah, this other person. So we got 3 here. I don't even know whether I should count me. But if you are attempting to see something out of the ordinary, there is nothing that will ever be gained. There is nothing fresh, there is nothing new, there is nothing alive. It has nothing to do with the future. You're not feeding your future. If you're putting together the creature, if you're putting together the creature with used urine, used words, used ideas, you're marking off, and the territory itself is used. That is, it's already established. There is no joy there, as British dogs and bushes like to say. Well, to finish out that paragraph, I was thinking to steal or to rephrase, if not improve, the song title, if not the song of that other great American singing philosopher, Peter Allen, Everything Old is Old Again. Look it up and think about it. I didn't swear it was an improvement. I said if I may rephrase it, and I just said impossibly improve it. Let's see if we can pick up something else that we were talking about, you recall the classical idea in physics, and we have even mentioned it here in passing, that in all energy transformations, all energy transfers, that it is never complete, and energy, some energy, is always what? Is everybody's fingers ready? Lost. I always feel like a chipmunk. I don't. Somebody ought to check on that to see what's the latest on chipmunk philosophies. The idea that energy is lost. That at the 3D level, there is no doubt, as proven clinically, scientifically, objectively, that any time that matter goes from one state to another, energy is moved from one place to another, some is lost. There is no such thing as a total transfer of energy. And I have even in here used maps pointing out that when people attempt to mark off areas, when people attempt to convey information to each other, none of it will ever go directly. That no matter how hard you try, whatever the idea was, if we could outline, if we could do a holograph of anything you're trying to tell somebody, of any consequence, and they try their best to take it, and you try your best to convey it, it will never come out perfect. Which, for those of you who have tried to be ministers or lead some kind of New Age group or to lead yourself around, think about that sometime. Not to mention being a mother or father. I said don't mention that. Even though energy, information, cannot be totally transferred, that always some is, all the chipmunks, lost. You recall, we were bringing that up to a more expanded version. There is a primo example that is pretty current, it's in your lifetime, of the unseen dynamics behind a part of this. Scientists, thinkers, theoreticians have this claim, this cry they make, that they say that the information, the ideas, the knowledge they've come up with, and they always point, it's normally at the government, which is not, let's just look at that. They will point to some other extrinsic territory. And they will say that their knowledge has been misused. The prime example that I was referring to was in the last 40 years was the development of atomic weapons, and all of these poor scientists. Don't get hung up and think that was a sarcastic phrase, a poor scientist, but the people who developed the theories, the mathematics, the ideas, the knowledge of the atomic structure and operations as it was known in the 1930s and 40s, and some of it still apparently operational. Turned into, once it got in the hands of the government, into the military, once it fell into ordinary city institutional hands, they say it got misused. And they do it even to today. Every now and then, you can, if you watch the news, somebody will be testifying before a committee in Congress, and they'll say something about how they are resisting the military establishment or making some denunciation of our country or some other country's military posture and how aggressive we are. And I, for one, have been studying theoretical mathematics having to do with trajectories and the idea of five-dimensional geometry. And it turns out every time I get a government grant, they end up sticking me over there somewhere, if not in the Pentagon, somewhere down the road, and it ends up that there's some general, he's dressed up in a 3D suit, but he's looking on my shoulder, and he's not interested in the beautiful ideas that I have of theoretical mathematics. He's trying to figure how could we use this to better send rockets and attack Mississippi, Russia. This misuse of information, and it's not all that new, that claim, because if you're good, of course, you should be able to take this immediately on your own, away from scientists, that is, external, three-dimensional examples of there being some scientists over here claiming that the government over here stole their ideas, because there's nothing going on at the atomic, remember, cosmic, remember, or animal level that's not going on inside of man. But at any rate, back to the example for those of you that need a crutch, help, assistance, elaboration. You do understand, without us having any sides to take in this, of thinkers always saying that their ideas are misused, and it's not limited just to Einsteins and the Plancks and the people during this century that were developing the ideas that led to the ability to technologically construct an atomic device that would make a lot of people nearby go, wow, gee, and hurt them. It's not just that. There have been people, thinkers, philosophers throughout history that would come up with some what they thought brand new idea, even if it apparently had no technological applications. The king or somebody would take the idea and then, according to their view, and twist it to his own advantage, to continue to try and manhandle and bamboozle the people by taking this new philosophical idea he had. Or somebody claimed they had some kind of religious visions, some new message from the gods that says we should do things differently, mark off new territory in the people's minds, and the king hears it, and rather than just kill the guy, which any good king is going to do that, because you don't need competition, especially somebody hollering, hey, there's somebody bigger than the king. The king hears it oftentimes and goes, that ain't bad. Or if it's not him, one of his right-hand men, which all good kings need 4 or 5, they say, hey, take that idea, don't worry about killing the guy, just take the idea and say that you immediately recognize the validity of the idea, maybe bring him over here and throw a feast in his honor, and we'll poison him, or we'll put him away, or give him a job in the bureaucracy, and that'll be the end of him. But the idea is too good. Don't resist the idea, bring it over here, and all we got to do is, as they call it now in the press corps, I think in Washington, put a certain kind of spin on it. And this idea, rather than it being a denunciation of you or some kind of battle cry that the people, you fear the people is going to take the battle cry as being the marking off of a whole new territory in their minds that's going to give you potential problems. Just give it just a slight little thing like that, and you adopt it and you use it. And then the philosophers go to their graves, thinkers, religious prophets, technicians, mathematicians, scientists saying, my information, that is the new territories, the new information, the creatures I constructed, the Philistines, kings, rulers, military people, my neighbors, have misused it. And they cry out about it. They do not. They cannot realize that all the time they were talking, all the time they were involved, because everything that did get produced in some way, whether it been the information behind the atomic theories, whether it was a guy coming up with some new philosophical information, it always took place under the pressures, under the situation that there was some C and D dance going on, either between him and somebody else, him and another scientist, or within himself, of him apparently trying to figure out, is this the way people should live? Is this my new message? Are the gods talking to me? So something was going on. Let's go back to the scientists right quick. Let's say we got 2 scientists, 2 large groups, it doesn't matter, and they're the ones back in the early teens of this century and into the 20s and the 30s coming up trying to hash out the real atomic theory, that aspect of it that makes it feasible and possible to technologically construct an atomic bomb. It was not just one guy. Even if they give one guy credit, you understand that by now. This one guy had to play C to a whole bunch of other people's D, or they had to play C to his D. In other words, they all got them danced. Einstein danced with somebody, and they danced with somebody else. They wrote letters back and forth. They published papers. They got in secret. Dance went on. They were continually talking about, let's say, the atomic theory, the information behind the atomic bomb. And then they cry out, wait a minute, our information has been misused. Our knowledge has been misused, that the government, we were just peace-loving scientists. Most of us are real underweight, and we're real frightened. We don't like to fight or hang out in bars in Mississippi. We're certainly not the sorts to start wars. But by God, they took our beautiful information, beautiful little equations we had, and they turned it into a device to kill people. All the time they were talking, developing this, they didn't understand that other information was going right out of the room, right out of the laboratory, flowing directly to the e-pool. That all the time they were talking about this, they were talking to somebody else and they didn't know it. They were sending out sperm. It produced, not a love child, it produced a new idea child that now has sprung up, a healthy mutant. These peace-loving scientists. A few years later, suddenly look around and there is this real healthy, brand new, bouncing baby bomb. And they're surprised. No, not surprised, they're mad, as mad as scientists can be, that they have misused our information. They were laying the groundwork, not that they had any choice, not that they could have done otherwise, but they were creating the pregnancy, them and everyone else, about what they're apparently doing at the C and D level. That is what they think they're doing. They're also doing something else. And the more meaningful it is to life, not to the individuals, but the more life needs it, is you're going to have sometime later a brand new, unexpected idea child pop up. And it may seem foreign, such as the scientists. They may say, the idea of a bomb, of a weapon, of that actually flowing from our work here in this lab is unthinkable. But any new idea child, in this case the bomb, that bomb is going to look at least 1/3, if you got a kind of view, is going to look, at least 1/3 is going to resemble those scientists. This new idea child, let's say it can say 3 words, goo goo dad, or goo daddy, then one of the 3 words it can say is going to be your name. That is the scientist. Somebody that says, I have got no responsibility to this bomb. None. This bomb is a bastard. This bomb is a mutation that's got nothing to do with my work because they misuse the information. That bomb, if it can say 3 words, one of the 3 words is going to be the name of the guy denouncing it. In other words, the bomb's going to be saying, Daddy. And it's going to be looking directly at him. He's going, no, no, no. And he's saying, no, no, no. I had nothing to do with it. And when it came out of that e-poo, here it is sprung up, healthy, full born, ready to go. Whatever it says, I'm using 3. When I keep saying 3 words, I assume you follow the reason I'm doing that. The guy even denouncing it, saying they misused it. I would have done anything to stop it, which he couldn't. He didn't help. He didn't hurt. He just helped feed it. But if it says 3 words, one of the 3 words is, to him, Daddy. Of course, it, in general, is going to have 2 other parents. But at least 1/3 will be the person denouncing it, or saying the information was misused. And it's not a matter in the secondary world of it actually being misused. What they're saying is it was newly used. Of course, they'd never say that. But that is exactly what it is the e-poo produced a healthy mutant. It was a new idea. It was a new idea in a new territory. Now, again, right quick, if you'll forget scientists and atomic bombs and all that, that doesn't sound familiar. You don't see that happens to the individual nervous system of people believing they're putting together new ideas, and they'll even denounce themselves, but they'll especially denounce each other that, listen, I tried to tell you so-and-so. Did I not? People talk to their kids. Kids talk to people. Men to women. Did I not try to tell you so-and-so? Yeah, I remember that. Well, I told you specifically, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, I heard it, and I tried to operate on it. Well, wait a minute. No, you didn't try. If you tell me the truth, if you heard me, you're lying to me now because you didn't try, because you took the very thing I told you should do, and you twisted it. You did almost the opposite. Or you did that which had no relationship to what I was trying to help you do, and they both kind of look at each other. They can get into a fist fight, or it just gets into a secondary staring match, or Jesus. And of course, people are left with the thing that, well, the Tower of Babel did not disintegrate. We're living in the mother. Nobody understands anything. Sure they do. The scientists, they misused our information. That bomb has no relationship to me. And if they knew what was going on, if they'd look, that bomb would be looking like, Daddy, Daddy. Because children recognize their parents. It's just in the more manifold view of what's going on in life, you've got 3 parents. Every idea has 3 sources. The new territory, the future, is fed by the E. The future is not fed by the obvious. The future is not fed by that which is presently struggling. Not that you can see from any ordinary view.